Hi, welcome to Milk Talks Creativity in Confinement. Today we'll be running a panel discussion with three incredible artists. So the first artist I'd like to introduce you to is Rachel Ara. Rachel is an artist known for her large-scale physical and digital sculptures. Her work has been shown internationally, and she is just incredible at what she does. So I look forward to you kind of getting to know her a bit better today. Likewise, I'm also being joined by Kid Circus, who is not just a phenomenal fashion and portrait photographer who's based in London, but also just an incredibly interesting human being whose insights I think will be really inspiring to a lot of people tuning in. And finally, Mariell Guzman is joining us all the way from Fort Worth in Texas. She is a painter and multidisciplinary artist, but she's best known for her large murals that are extremely vibrant in colour and extremely warm. So the purpose of today is to obviously talk around the topic of creativity and confinement. And whilst I really wish that we had an answer for all of you that are listening of how to be the most productive that you can during this time and how to kind of find creativity when you're just not feeling it. Unfortunately, I don't think any of us are going to be able to answer that for you today. But what I do think is that we may be able to offer some sort of hope and also just feeling that you're not alone. If you're somebody that likes to create or creates for a living, then, I hope that you take away from this that it's okay that if you're struggling. So I think we can all kind of acknowledge that at the moment, this is a really, really difficult and strange time. And I think, certainly today we're going to discuss a lot about it. But before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to meet the panelists yourself and hear in their own words sort of how they describe themselves and their work. So Rachel, I'll start with you. But how would you describe your work to others that maybe aren't familiar with it?
It's really hard. I think with my work, I'm an artist. It's more sculptural. I think I come from a concept point of view, so everything's so very, very different. So it all comes from the idea that's very much based around technology and feminism. I guess because I worked in the tech industry for 30 years. So one of my pieces might have taken the form of holographic nuns, one at the V&A, and then one more recently, which was a self-evaluating artwork. So it continually calculated its own sales price. That was a very large-scale physical sculpture that I build as well. I build and program them generally myself.
And Kid, moving on to you. For those that aren't familiar with your photography, how would you describe your style of work?
So I would describe primarily that my work is fashion and portrait photography. And I'm sure none of us like describing our work. I actually took to asking my friends to help describe what they think they see in my work. And I got stuff back like, your work's quite intimate, it's quite emotive, it's quite expressive. You got a lot of sort of natural portraits. One person said your stuff has a street edge, whatever the hell that means. Though actually, thinking about it, when I think about my background in photography before doing fashion portraits, I actually began doing landscape and street photography. So there might be some merit in that. But yeah, that's about as much as I could get close to describing my own work. I don't like doing it. And now I can see that no one else does either.
And Marielle, how would you describe your work to everybody that's tuning in?
So yeah, again, I've also struggled with this question, but I've noticed that it's something you continuously have to talk about, and people want to really get to know what's kind of pushing you to make the work that you make. So for mine, since I work in large murals, but then also make smaller paintings and sculptures and also do installations, it's all kind of rooted from my experience growing up in Mexico. So it's all very inspired by kind of growing up being surrounded by a lot of color and public art and different ways of artistic expression coming from many different traditions from different generations. So it's kind of been all that in me wanting to do that, then like adapting in like a new culture after moving here to the US, but knowing how powerful color can be and how it can really just affect someone in a positive way. So that's why we like to create very immersive works that can just help people like sorry, I'm like, I feel like I'm rambling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think as somebody, for those listening in, I've actually had the absolute sort of privileged position of going to Texas and actually seeing some of Mariell's work firsthand. And I completely understand what you mean. Like, I definitely felt extremely moved and certainly like very immersed by all the colours. And, you know, I think there's something very warm about the work that you do, and it's very inclusive, and I think that's probably why a lot of people really like connect with it. So I think it's pretty, you know, important that we really acknowledge the situation that's going on in the world. You know, certainly this is a really turbulent and difficult time for many of us, and I think the thing that all of us are realizing is that whilst we're all experiencing it, the individual impact on us, I think is really unique and different for everybody, and we're all going to come out of this both with a shared experience, but also, you know, our own individual story of this time. So I just wanted to start by finding out sort of, you know, how our panelists have been personally impacted by everything that's going on at the minute. So Rachel, how would you describe that you've been impacted by everything that's going on in the world?
Personally impacted. Oh my God, it's just been such an emotional roller coaster. I think I was mad enough to begin with, but I mean, at the time this was happening, I had my first public sculpture commission. I was installing it at UCL Slade, and just as I was finishing installing it, the whole university closed down. And then I guess everyone sort of was isolating in the house, and you're going, oh my God, everyone's dying, you know, I've got to go out and I've got to help and I've got to do something. So you go through that. So then I did a few sort of like food deliveries and joined the volunteer service and all stuff like that. I mean, I guess work goes to the back, doesn't it? Yeah. It's, you know, and then you speak to other friends, and then you're not going to the studio because you're kind of in solidarity with all your other art colleagues, and you don't think you should go to the studio because you need to keep your distance and stuff like that. And then after about 5 weeks, I did start going to the studio, and then you realise most people were at the studio anyway because the car park was full. I remember the first day I turned up, and it's just been weird. I've just spent, you know, a lot of the time tidying. My concentration's not there at all. I mean, I've had people around die as well, so it's quite serious. So you're sort of up and down. Sometimes you forget about things, and then sometimes you remember there's a virus. So I can't say, but it's made you think a lot. I don't know how to say it, but I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to experience it as well. Do you see what I mean? Because I think if you're going to respond to something, which I mean artists generally do, I think you have to be in it. And I'm very aware that if one had just kept going and ignored it, do you know what I mean? That what would you be responding to? You'd be responding to the media about it and not to having lived it. And I think sometimes there's this pressure, you know, after week 2, there was these virtual exhibitions and people wanting you to do this, that and the other. And you were just thinking, well, how can I comment on something I'm just in the middle of? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that listen to this and really relate to that kind of feeling of, you know, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's one of those things that you feel very much like responsible to need to do something. Like you feel like you need to go out and do something about it. But sometimes actually going out and doing things is, you know, the thing that's putting you at risk. And you know, intertwining that with our work is really hard.
And it's the anger as well. It's the anger at the government, you know, who've been so incompetent, and the consistent lying. I think that takes over my mind. So you're sort of like festering, you know, why are they doing this, you know? And that's been hard to concentrate.
And Kid, I'll ask you next. how do you feel that you've been impacted by everything?
Yeah, I mean, obviously lots of stuff got cancelled. Essentially, stuff that I had sort of been planning for a while, work, editorials, projects. I mean, I was looking forward to a productive like couple of months, and then lockdown gets announced, everything gets shut down, everything gets put on ice. So yeah, it was frustrating. You know, it was a kind of what the fuck do I do now kind of thing. You know, you're kind of like oscillating between wanting to be super productive, and then you're kind of lacking motivation, and you're trying to sort of figure out how you make sense of it all, and what can you do, you know, in a wider context, or in terms of your work as well as in terms of your work. And so I think probably like a lot of other people, you kind of end up in this, you know, no 2 days are going to be the same. You're going to go from one day feeling a little bit hopeful that you might navigate through it all right, and then you despair at the world, and then the next thing you're sitting there shouting at the screen when the government do their latest press conference, despairing again. So yeah, it's been a trip. I'll tell you that much. It's been a trip.
Mariell, how about you? How do you feel that you've kind of been impacted by everything?
So same as everyone, got a lot of major projects canceled. Like this was, I remember in February being like, oh my god, this is gonna be my year, because I'm still getting started, I'm still early career, and it's all very unknown. But then this was like, I had all this hope and excitement, and then everything just went away, disappeared. And so yeah, it was terrifying, and I was just filled with anxiety and inevitably depression, because I feel like every artist, like, you feel like making work is what gives you purpose. So whenever you're not able to produce any work, you just like feel like, what can I do? Like, and it's terrifying. But yeah, then obviously the way it's been handled, especially in Texas, like not even just the US, like Texas just, they have their own mind of their, like, they just, I don't understand, honestly. Like even now, like everyone is going out, like everything's fine, all the bars are filled, no one's like following the social distancing or wearing masks and stuff. So I don't know, it's just confusing. It's a very weird time. You realize people are very selfish, and I don't know, like this is just so much larger than any of us, or like people just can't put themselves, like their own ego, their own wants aside to just like care for like what's, you know.
So as somebody that's known for obviously doing these large scale murals, Mariell, do you think that COVID-19 has sort of changed the type of work that you're producing now?
I've gone back to just producing smaller work, kind of taking my time to just develop just more personal work and do more research, do more reading, which I was really excited to have time for. But also I've been wanting to find ways, because I like to make interactive work. So then whenever people started doing like coloring pages, because that's become like a trend, and I love the idea of like adults just going back to like the very simple joy of coloring something. So then I started to produce some like coloring pages, and I did get to do it for one of the major magazines, to like have them show it to like Dallas, and like anyone could download for free. So that was really nice to just still find a way to like connect with others and give them some source for like therapy, or just to like, you know, be okay even for like 20 minutes just by focusing on like what they want to color a certain part. Yeah, it's just simple things like that that can give us some relief.
Rachel, as somebody that predominantly makes, you know, large-scale artwork that's often like exhibited in gallery spaces, how would you approach, showcasing your work if all of these venues essentially are shut?
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, I think it's been a good thing because I've been going off sort of gallery spaces anyway, and it's how to get more cut through in the work. I mean, it's made me think a lot about that anyway. Yeah, because at the moment I've been writing all over my van, which has become viral, so that's my new outlet. I think Piers Morgan retweeted my van. Did you see that?
I did. For anybody that's listening, go and follow Rachel on Instagram and go and have a look at her van. It is absolutely priceless. It's amazing.
It's called Vanny McVanface, I think. But it's about, it's just generally, it's made me think what art is about and what we're trying to achieve with art, and it's just how to engage people and what sort of people you're engaging. Because I mean, obviously, if you're producing art for a gallery, you're producing it for a sort of very minority, people who are educated within the history of art, and you're making all those references and connections, but it's how to produce something that maybe can be sophisticated but does have that cut through, and that's been quite interesting.
Kid, as a photographer that specialises in shooting people, how are you going to navigate sort of producing work in this new world?
We're gonna make it work, right? Like, it's true. Like, I mean, I know, like, we're in this period where brands are doing a sort of the self shoot kind of content kind of route. But in terms of like what I do, I mean, I already know a couple of studios across London are starting to reopen. One particular one literally banged a screenshot of their new guidelines all over their socials. It was like stuff like reducing the capacity to, like, I don't know, a maximum of 8 people, making sure you stagger the call times, I don't know, avoiding sharing personal property. I mean, going so far as to suggest people like make sure they bring their own food and their own cutlery, like all these things that they want to try and put in place so that people get into the habits of the new normal. But, even things like hearing of makeup artists undergoing new training from the Beauty Guild that is directly COVID infection prevention related training, that sort of gets them the piece of paper that says they've done this training and they are aware of their responsibilities and the practices that they now need to do in the course of doing their jobs. And so I think, we're just going to have to kind of figure out new ways, change our practices. I'll be using my longer lenses more than I probably ever have done. My 70 to 200 is going to get a lot of work going forward in the next few months and beyond. And so, I do think that people are just going to work out different ways to do stuff. If it's as simple as not necessarily getting photographers flown over to a different part of the world to shoot a campaign, looking more local, for example, just to limit travel.
So Mariell, my question for you is, what impact do you think that the pandemic is having on new artists that are just starting out?
I think, definitely the lack of opportunities to expose their work, physically at least. Because I know there's a lot of my friends are either showing galleries or also want to get into doing murals and stuff. So they ask me like how they can get one, but a lot of that is just kind of like networking and especially with new businesses. But both of those things are just they don't exist right now. You can't go out and network with people. You can't go to gallery shows and talk to people and meet other people and be part of our community physically. That's why I've always pushed just the power of social media and kind of just really putting your work out there virtually and sharing it with the world. That's what's helped me a lot personally with my own work and getting more people to see it. I think it's just a weird time because obviously like a lot of work needs to be experienced physically, and it's hard for some artists to just have to limit the way people get to experience it now to just the virtual gallery that is the new normal.
And Rachel, in the past, we've talked a lot about funding for artists and more to the point, the lack of it. So do you think that anything's going to change in terms of accessibility of funding as a result of the pandemic?
Well, if we're talking about fine art, I mean, fine art's a funny thing, and there's hardly any money in it anyway. And like you were talking about career from just starting out to being established or mid-career, I mean, at each point there is nothing. Do you see what I mean? So it's like you're progressing in a nothingness. By mid-career, probably 80% of people have dropped out and had to go and work in call centres. And, you know, you only really make it to the end if a gallery's supporting you, because they're the ones who are going to be showing you. So, you know, I mean, it's a funny thing anyway, that only privileged people to an extent can practice art. Because, you know, if you're poor, you have to have a job. I mean, this is in a reason why I started late in life, because I had to work for so many years. So, I mean, that really needs to be changed, and there should be more support like there are in other countries. There's very little support. So, I mean, at the moment, I mean, the Arts Council were giving sort of grants, maximum grants of 2,500. I think they've stopped now, and that's it. And then basically, when you've had this grant, it means you're not eligible to actually apply for many other grants or many other things that are there because you've had the support. So, I mean, I'd advise people to look on sort of sites like ArtQuest or Artist Newsletter, but there's very, very little about. But I don't think it's going to get worse. I mean, it was bloody awful anyway.
And Kid, obviously, you know, we work sort of a lot of the time in the commercial world and sort of around content creation. So what impact do you think everything is going to have on our ability to create content?
I kind of feel like the industry in general is maybe just will come under more scrutiny in terms of just, you know, the stories that sort of people will carry with them beyond all of this. You know, that's going to inform the movies we watch, the TV that gets made, you know, music, lots of other sort of forms of art. And I think that in turn, brands are going to have to be wise to those movements and those changes. I mean, look at what's going on now. You know, how brands are like thinking how, you know, the brands that are being called out for not responding to what's going on at the moment. And that's just now. Think about 6 months ahead. And I think they, you know, it will keep them on their toes a bit more. I hope. I also hope that this may result in more underrepresented voices being part of what brands put out. I think one particular brand that I think is doing a really good job of this is Refinery 29. They seem to be very nimble in kind of like bringing personal stories to the forefront, sort of being kind of reactive and timely and breaking in what content they put out, getting different, you know, perspectives of people that you would say are sort of underrepresented in terms of what brands put out to market their stuff, sell stuff. So, and they've, you know, I think they've kind of jumped on that in a timely fashion because more media is being consumed, and more brands are going to have to think about how they do that and how nimble that they can be to react to the events as they change, because, you know, none of us have got a crystal ball about what's going to be going on in a month's time, let alone 3 to 6 months. So I don't envy the brands having to navigate that in that respect.
Now, Mariell, I'm obviously quite familiar with you and with your work, and I know that one thing that you've always been amazing at is collaboration with other artists, but often, you know, in ways that don't necessarily support social distancing. So how do you think creatives are going to collaborate in this kind of new world in which we're living in?
Yeah, I mean, I think artists are going to start to collaborate more in the digital form. That's actually something that I began to do a lot of. one of my friends from Miami started a whole organization called Distant Collabs, and because he wanted artists to be able to connect through this, especially just to feel like we're not alone and like you can still create something powerful together, even if you feel so isolated and alone. So then all these artists from all over the US just applied to it, and then they just kind of matched artists. So I got to work with someone in LA that I've never met before, and her work is fantastic. And we just created like a digital illustration, just back and forth. And then I also worked with someone in Brooklyn. So it was a lot of feeling like, hey, people want to work with other artists, and just kind of knowing like you just have to reach out and like show that you admire their work and you would like to work with them. And like they might say no, they're busy, but it's okay.
Rachel, one of the things I'm really interested in is sort of as a creative community, do you think that we have a responsibility in this time? And if so, you know, what kind of responsibility do you think that is?
You know, there needs to be a revolution. Nothing is going to change. Women are going to carry on being killed. Black people are going to carry on being killed. Nothing is going to change unless we do something, just something completely different. You know, there needs to be some major revolution, and maybe the artists could be the thinkers in this, but it needs to be everyone. You know, you need to carry on this momentum every day.
Kid, obviously, me and you have kind of talked at length about the importance of collaboration between artists. And I wondered, sort of, during this time of separation, how important do you think collaboration is now?
I think it's hugely important. I think it's just been very heartening to see different people across different disciplines reaching out to each other. Even if it's literally just to get on a Zoom like this and just talk and to see where, you know, at which point they can meet in the middle to work together or collaborate together. And so I think I'm sort of starting to see, you know, the possibilities of, you know, people getting into different groups and hubs that can share across disciplines or share skills or help each other out. You know, there's nothing to say, you know, an art director, a photographer, and I don't know, a 3D artist can get together as a one-stop shop to kind of create together or offer their services as one entity. And so I think a lot of people are looking at sort of the benefits in terms of just artistic practice, as well as, you know, the work that they can kind of do as well. And I think that will create some really good, you know, I'm hopeful that will create some really good stuff, because we all have a shared goal in terms of wanting to create together and collaborate on stuff together. And yeah, I just think the creative community in general have been very supportive of one another. It's been very heartening to see and be part of as well.
And the final question I'm going to ask is around, you know, so the final question that I'm going to ask you for everybody that's tuning in and listening is basically, what advice would you give to other artists during this time? Kid, I'll start with you.
My advice is there's no right or wrong way about any of this. And anybody who tells you any different, you need to just send them on their way, because, you know, from a personal experience, you know, you can have periods where you can kind of just plan on stuff you want to do, but then sometimes you just have to take a step back. You just have to sit back and think, you know, really have a think about what you want to do once things start to get going again.
Marielle, what kind of advice would you give?
I mean, honestly, everything you just said was perfect. Like, I don't know how much more I can add. Because, yeah, it's just take it one step at a time. And it's okay to have bad days where you wake up at 3 p.m. and then you don't do anything for the rest of the day. I had a hard time with that because I'm someone who gets anxious if I'm not being productive. But then I was just like, this is, like I said, this is larger than any of us. There's a lot of fear and just uncertainty going on, and it's okay to just be and take it one day at a time. I mean, it's get beyond the COVID, like everything going on right now in America and like all this protest, like yeah, it's getting to be like so overwhelming with like emotions and anger and frustration. And yeah, it's confusing as an artist to just want to do something, want to use the power of art to be part of the movement, but wanting to do it in the best way possible. So yeah, it's a weird, confusing time, but it's okay to feel like this. And just as long as you spread the right message, I think.
Rachel, do you have any advice you'd like to share with everyone?
I just think to keep talking, to keep learning, and to keep an open mind, because you really realise that people are experiencing the same things as you. I think if you're passive as a social media user, everyone seems to be doing very well and seems to be being productive, and it makes you feel quite bad, but you realise that's in a sense not the truth. So it's really important to keep these human connections, and I think that helps keep your mental health. So just communication, it doesn't have to be talking, whether it's writing or emails.
Thanks so much for listening. We really hope that as a result you feel slightly less alone in all of this, and just feel some comfort in listening to other artists talk about these topics. If you'd like to get in touch with any of the panelists or myself, you can shoot me an email below, and I can pass any questions on to the panelists. Thanks.